when you actually believe that you can figure out how things work on your own, it takes less effort, right, to try and fail.
By the way, if I was lost, I'd want to be lost with you. I feel it. Like you're like a MacGyver.
That natural curiosity, that comfort with not knowing, and then the willingness to dive in to learn about it is also a confidence builder.
Hi, I'm Jim Fielding. Welcome to Ask for an Answer. Hello, kind, curious, and talented human beings. It is time for another episode of Ask for an Answer with Jim Fielding. I love all of my episodes. You guys know that, but I think this one's going to be really special. My guest today is Leslie Grandy, and she has been so patient. We have had this thing scheduled because of my schedule several times. And I'm just, first off, thank you for your flexibility, but I'm so excited you're here. And I think it's just going to be this wonderful freewheeling conversation. I don't know if either one of us even knows where it's going to go, but I knew when we did the pre-call, it was going to be amazing. And so I've been so looking forward today. So welcome, Leslie.
Thanks so much for having me. I feel the same way. I will say that waiting was just building anticipation. So if anything, I'm more energized and motivated for this conversation. So I think there was a little maybe trick in your approach there to really build my enthusiasm for this conversation.
It was not intentional, but if that worked, great. Maybe I'll use it in the future. I'll just tease people and then cancel them at the last minute. Literally, listeners and viewers, Leslie was scheduled and I canceled her like an hour before we were going to record because something happened in my family, and she was so gracious about it. And I felt so terrible. But I also believe, you and I talked about this, things happen for a reason. And so I was like, okay, we're supposed to record now rather than, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks ago we were recording, maybe 8 weeks ago. So Anyway, welcome. Tell everybody the Leslie story that you want to share and what you're focusing on and what your life is like. That'll be a great start.
Oh, well, thanks, Tim. And again, I'm excited to be a part of this conversation with you because I really love what you stand for and what you advocate. So I'm looking forward to it. I started my career in the film industry, so we have a little bit of that in common. I graduated with a film degree from Northwestern and moved to Hollywood and worked my butt off to get a career built in the film industry, and was really successful. I was really grateful that despite having no connections and no prior contacts in the film industry, I was able to navigate through and ultimately become a member of the Directors Guild of America as an assistant director. And I worked for Brian De Palma and James Cameron. And as I got into my 30s...
By the way, tap dancing over that. We'll come back to that. Those are big names, by the way. I'm sure most people realize that, but okay.
But there was a point at which in my 30s, I realized that wasn't the career I wanted for the rest of my life. And part of the reason is it was so consuming, all consuming. And it really was, I think, a different lifestyle that went along with that career that I wasn't really sure I wanted as I was building family and connection and my adult life independent from my family. So I got an MBA at the University of Washington, and my first job out of school was as an intern at a company that was going public, and they hired me to do their IPO roadshow film. So the transition from film into technology and into business was really made because of that film experience. And then I got offered a job at a company called Vizio, where ultimately I stayed for 4 years until they were bought by Microsoft for $1 billion. And then I built my career since then at companies like Apple and T-Mobile and Best Buy and Discovery Networks and Amazon, working as a product executive, launching first to market products. And that pivot from the film industry to product leadership sounds a little bit more hard of a turn than it really was, because I think a lot of the skills that I needed to succeed in the film industry were really essential for leading teams into innovation areas and disruption. and being comfortable without having a playbook for how to go do the thing we were doing. And so during that time, I was able to be a part of the first Android phone launch when I was at T-Mobile. I am co-author of a patent for the first online streaming service before there was Hulu and Netflix that Intel bought and just expired a couple of years ago. So I've really enjoyed the opportunity to find my place in a world of technology that's constantly changing, which is very similar to the film industry. So I think that's why I was well suited for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And you realize, I mean, I think it's fascinating to me because when we talked about this when we met before, that you realize that in your 30s. I mean, and that was a lot of self-awareness in your 30s. People who listen to this podcast know, like, I didn't really make my pivot until I was in my 50s. I wish I had learned it in the 30s. But I was so impressed when we met and you told me that you had that self-awareness and kind of that forward-looking, and I get it. I get why the pivot worked, but it does from the outside look like a pretty big pivot. I mean, to go from film into tech and vice versa, you know?
Yeah, I think there were two moments if you're kind of looking for
Yeah.
like that light bulb moment of why this isn't
Moment.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah, why it's not working. One is I'm really fortunate in another way, which I can't discount. I found my person for the life I wanted to lead when I was in my 30s. We're still together. It's been 43 years, been married for almost 30. I think finding that person and recognizing the balance I needed to support that to grow into what it needed to grow. I just didn't think it was possible with the lifestyle I had being on set and on location. I got to go to amazing places and do amazing things with people that I had no business being connected with because of my small town Philadelphia background. I
Yeah.
really got to do the journey that I should have done when I left it behind, which is kind of the second reason. I think people worry about the pivot because they don't know they've done what they need to know about why they should
Mhm.
pivot, and they're not
Mhm.
sure that they should pivot for the right reasons yet. And for me, I think what was really clear and what was really evident was the person I would have to be in order to continue to be successful would undermine that capacity to be the person I wanted to be in my relationship. And I thought that choice was one that I remember very vividly because at the same time my husband was working. So I was working for both Brian De Palma and his wife, who was a producer, Gail Ann Hurd. And
Mm.
she had previously been married to James Cameron, which is how I worked for him as well. But I worked for both of them, and my husband just worked for Brian. And there was a point at which we said, I think their marriage will not last the year, and we need to stay together.
Mm.
We don't need to be divided because
Right.
that's their
Because they
lifestyle. That's
decided.
what they've
Exactly.
chosen.
Right.
Right. And so choosing to move towards something rather than move away from it, I think made that pivot a lot more comforting. Right.
Yeah.
I knew what I was choosing for.
But did you, I mean, I think basically what you're saying, I mean, you prioritize that relationship, which I think is so amazing. Was that a decision or it was just like, nope, this relationship is it? Like, did you struggle with that decision or you were like, nope, this relationship is the most important thing and that everything else lines up behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So by the time we made this decision, we had been together for 8 or 9 years. So there
Wow.
was a lot invested already in it. And we had moved
Right.
in together 2 or 3 years before. So we had dated for 7 years and then we had started living together. And so there was a lot of clarity about what that relationship was, right? It wasn't a new one. It wasn't somebody I was dating that I was hoping to ask me to marry. I
Yeah.
didn't even
Yeah.
want to be a married person at that point. I just wanted the relationship. And so I
Right.
wanted to do what it would take. And I think there was enough history for me to know what I was, again, moving towards. I will say, again, another kind of wild component of this story is my husband is 22 years older than I am. And he was 22
Right.
years older than me back then, too.
Yeah.
And so my parents thought every decision I made, which was to move to Hollywood and become in the film industry, to get involved with someone who was 22 years older, they did not support. And yet they were all the right decisions. And I
Yeah.
think that's the other part of this for me was I had confidence that my parents couldn't make those decisions for me. My parents were married 3 times. They were not happy in their lives. So I wasn't looking for their guidance as to what to do. I was looking for what I felt I wanted to build going forward. And that made the choice a little clearer for me.
But I mean, Leslie, that you realize that that is incredibly strong on your part because you had a belief in yourself and your own core system. I mean, I'm seeing your thing in my coaching practice. You weren't seeking external validation. Like you literally were like, this is my path. That is my person. It does not matter. He's 22 years older. It does not matter that my parents don't approve. You weren't seeking approval. You were looking in the mirror and seeking approval from yourself. And I try to coach to that. And you know how hard that is for some people. I mean, some
Yeah.
never, and we talked about this, especially in that Hollywood value system that you and I both were in. External validation and being able to say, I work for James Cameron, I work for Brian De Palma, I produced that film, or I, I co-produced this. That's like a calling card in Hollywood, and it opens up a lot of doors. And walking away from that, you're walking away from access in a way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, stature, right? It's a stature thing. And
it is.
so to go from that stature to start over as a, associate product manager at
Yeah.
35 years old, working for a 25-year-old product manager with an MBA was hard. It took some some swallowing of my ego to recognize that pivot. But I think the thing that you're getting at, and I think the thing that is true is I always felt I had confidence in what I had the capacity to do. And I
Yeah.
think that when we talk about what work I do now, a lot of the work that I do is trying to give people that self confidence that they can solve problems, that they can figure stuff out. Because if you have that trait, if you believe in your capacity to figure stuff out,
Mm,
to creatively solve problems, to work with constraints, to work with lack of
mm,
knowledge, when you actually believe that you can figure out how things
mm.
work on your own, then it takes less it takes less effort, right, to try and fail, because the failing then becomes learning to do it better. And so for
Yeah.
me, I, I think the message that I give to people as I hit this stage of my career after all those jobs and writing a book is it's up to you to find that self-confidence. It's up to you to believe that you can figure stuff out. And I never didn't believe that. Even if it was something I'd ever been, I actually found joy in figuring stuff out. There was some
It's
relief
amazing.
and some fulfillment. Like, look what I figured out. I figured out how to get into the Directors Guild. By the way, there's a faster way to get in the Directors Guild is you take a test, and it's a day-long IQ test, basically. And
Yeah.
I didn't pass that test. So I could have rolled up the carpet and said, I'm not doing this anymore. But there's the other way, which is grind it out for 365
Earn it. I
work
was gonna say
days.
earn it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get there. And so I think knowing that I have the capacity to figure stuff out also kept me working that whole time in Hollywood. My biggest asset was that you could give me a problem I'd never seen before and I wouldn't run away from it. I
Yeah.
would
I
be
mean,
challenged by that.
you and I haven't known each other that long, but I already see you as a solution provider and a problems. Like you give me confidence. We've only met virtually. We've never
You're
met in
right.
person. And I get confidence through, the Zoom call, through the platform. Did you have, I mean, you mentioned your parents' marriages and a little bit of difference there, but did you have role models growing up? I mean, was there somebody, see, I think that's interesting too.
No, I can't actually point because most of the adults I had were in my parents' circle.
Right.
Um, I didn't go to a local school. I went to a private day school that was, a half an hour from my house, and so I didn't really have any circle of adults outside of school besides my parents. And although I did go to a private school, they were not. Encouraging. They weren't super
Right.
supportive.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of and it was to be fair, it was the late 60s, early 70s. And so
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of women, role models for me. in that era.
Mhm.
Most of my teachers were men. I had a smaller percentage that were women, and I just didn't have a lot of good working women role models. And I actually wanted to be a cinematographer, and there was only one female cinematographer at that time. And I could have gone to the American Film Institute cinematography program, but I couldn't afford it. And so I
Right.
had to make an adjustment from that. But I remember very much looking for somebody whose career I could model in the film industry. And at that period, you know as well as I do, there weren't
Yeah.
a lot of women doing those
No, I
things
mean,
that I could
I
use.
I mean, I might be wrong on this, so I'm sure the community will correct me, but didn't this year's Oscar, it was the first time a woman won cinematography, right? The woman
Yep,
from Sinners,
yep,
right? So we're in 2026. I mean, you're
yep,
talking about when you were coming into the industry, and it took till 2026
yep.
to have a woman win the Oscar for best cinematography,
And
which
there's
I
so
think,
many women cinematographers now. The fact that
yes.
that could happen was because there was a plethora of people to choose
Yeah, there
from.
was
But
choice. There was
yeah,
choice.
yeah.
There was choice. So take me back to the decision to go to Northwestern, because I'm also intrigued about that. Because you're Philadelphia, you're East Coast private school girl in Philadelphia, and you pick a school I love, by the way. I didn't go to Northwestern. I went to Indiana. We're both Big Ten. But how'd you pick Northwestern? That's
So it was
fascinating.
pretty. There's two aspects of it. I knew I wanted to be a film major because I had won a Young
Uh-huh.
Filmmakers Award my senior year for my independent study project, and I didn't want to live in the city of Manhattan. We spent all when you grow up in Philadelphia and your parents are culturally attuned, you're basically suburban New York. So we would go
Yes.
spend all of our time in New York and the opera and all of the things. And I got exposed to all of the great museums and everything, but I didn't feel like going to college. That was far enough. It was too close. It was too familiar. It didn't really seem like it was the experience I wanted. So I actually applied because everybody who goes to prep school in the East Coast applies to school in Boston. So I applied to Boston University because they had a film program. And I went up with my dad and I got accepted on the interview. And I was like, well, I'm not going here. And my dad's like, why? And I'm like, well, that was too freaking easy. If they want me that bad, how good is this program going to be? And I
I
was like,
love
that can't possibly be a worthwhile option for me. I'm not even
I
considering
love
it. So
the
I
way
never
your
actually,
brain works. I
I
love
know
the way your brain works. It's so funny.
it is pretty funny. So then I said I want to go to USC or UCLA, and my dad said he wouldn't subsidize my education if I did that. And so we joked, but it wasn't really a joke. I was only allowed to go to school as far away as I could drive home in a day. And that's how he got over the
Oh,
you can't go to California. I want to be able to make sure you could drive home in a day if something happened. I would want to make sure you were able to drive. And so if you drew a little circle around Pennsylvania, half of it would fall in the Atlantic Ocean. So that didn't count.
yeah.
And of all the places that fell in the circle where I could drive, which was 12 hours by car from Chicago to Philadelphia, Northwestern hit the mark for him saying I got a good education, and for me saying, all right, it's a reputable school for a film degree. It's
It
not
is.
like
Yeah, it is a good
from a
film.
film degree perspective, there were actual people in the industry
Yeah.
that believed that school produced talent.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I thought, all right, well, I'll get them off my back because it'll be a good school and it'll meet the criteria of driving home. But it'll help me migrate towards the West because at least I'll be in a completely different environment, having to figure out how to make it work. And that'll help
And
prepare me.
and did you have to go interview for that one too? I'm wondering if they made you work harder.
Nope, they did not. In fact, the other joke of this was I graduated second in my class in high school,
Okay,
and
so
my
you
school
good pick.
called my parents because I literally only applied to Northwestern and I only applied early admission. And so if
Okay.
I didn't get it, they called my parents and say she's not going to go to college because she's not going to
Yeah.
get in early admission. So you should be prepared that she's going to not be getting into college. And of course,
Yeah.
I got in early admission. So it literally was when I say of course, it was like I literally graduated second in my class, and I took all the AP classes, and all the metrics were there,
Yeah.
so there
Yeah.
was really no reason not to
Yeah.
believe I could get accepted. And again, I just believed I could. I had the confidence that I had the capacity to look different enough that I would stand out and they would take me. And it again I didn't apply anywhere else after that. I didn't, that was it. And I got in and I was like, all right, I'm out of
Yeah,
here.
you had no safety school. You had
No
no,
safety school.
I mean, it's funny. I only applied to a handful of schools because my dad gave me a budget for application fees, right? Like, because it
That's
wasn't
a
the
way to
common,
constrain it.
no, it wasn't the common application day, right? Like, it wasn't the thing where you just check a bunch of schools. Like, it literally was paying a fee and putting it
Yeah,
in an
right,
envelope. You remember, for each school, like it was a
right.
separate application, separate essay, separate check, and he gave me a budget. And the deal I had with my dad, because I went out of state, I was from Ohio, I went to Indiana, was he would pay in-state tuition equivalency, and anything
Uh-huh.
above and beyond that
Yeah.
I had to make up in scholarships or grants or work studies. So I did a combo. Like, I worked every day of college. Like,
Yeah.
I earned money every day of college, but I did get some scholarships and grants. And it's funny because I was 6 hours away. And that was a big thing for me because I was starting to, grapple with my identity and the questions about my sexuality and everything. And I thought, I got accepted at University of Michigan, and University of Michigan was only 45 minutes away from home. And I'm like, that's not
Not
long
far.
enough. They're going to pop up. Right. And if I'm experimenting, I need more
Distance,
space.
yeah.
Yeah, I need more distance. And so it's funny the way our little 16 and 17-year-old brains work. And I was like, well, 6 hours they'd have to plan. Like, 6 hours would be, they're not going to just pop up. They'd have to say, we're coming this weekend, and I'd have to arrange a hotel or whatever. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
and it worked out. And he also told me that he was never going to give me a car. You'll laugh at this because I love your 12-hour thing. My dad's like, we can't afford to give you a car. So you're going to have to take a bus, or like, you're going to have to meet people and all that. Like, by second semester freshman year, I had a car because there was times he had to come get me. I remember the first Thanksgiving, I'm like, Dad, I haven't met anybody that's coming to Toledo. And he had to do the round trip. And like, that only took one of those. And then all of a sudden at Christmas break, I was bequeathed a car.
That's so funny. So my parents, as soon as I turned 16, they didn't want to take me anywhere. So they gave me a
Yeah.
Volkswagen, and it was a manual stick shift. And I'd never imagined ever letting anybody drive my car. But that first freshman year going home, I had two guys who said they wanted to go with me and
Yeah.
share the driving. And I thought
Never
that would
thought.
be
Yeah.
wonderful. And you'll know this because you know exactly where I'm talking about. When you
Yeah.
leave Ohio and you go into Pennsylvania to go home, you hit the Alleghenies and it changes the
Yes.
weather instantly. Well,
Yes.
we spun out, totaled the car in a snowstorm, and I'm
I'm
sitting.
laughing.
I know it was just a perfect thing for finally letting somebody drive my car, and we spun out and totaled
Yeah.
the car. We're sitting on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, facing traffic with an immobile car and I'm still 6 hours from home. I'm
Right.
still 6 hours from home.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
at this point, again, my parents had kind of gone off on their own lives and doing all the
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
they would do. And we didn't have cell phones. And, I had one
Yeah.
credit card and I had a bunch of, emotions going through. What are we all okay? We're all okay. Great. Now what? How do we get home?
Right.
And so
Problem
even
solver.
that was
You're a
right.
problem.
Even that was a moment where it was like the two guys I was with had no clue what to do.
Useless. Useless.
You totally, and I was like, all right, we're going to get a ride over here, and then we're going to go find this, and then we're going to go do
Yeah.
that. And we found our way home 24 hours later. But even that, it didn't stop me, right? Like,
No.
every one of those moments, I think there has to be a way out of here. I can't wait for someone else to figure it out.
By the way, if I was lost, I'd want to be lost with you. I feel it. Like, I would like, I'm like, you're like a MacGyver. I'm like, okay, like Leslie's got it. Okay, I am going to make you laugh on this car thing. We are way going off on tangents here. So the car he bequeathed me because he wanted a new car. You can picture this. I don't know if all of our listeners and viewers will know this. He bequeathed me a 1976 Oldsmobile Toronado. Do you
Oh my
remember an
gosh.
Oldsmobile? Literally with the long nose.
Huge.
Remember the long nose, right?
Huge.
Now imagine that fitting in a dorm parking lot. I had to park through two spaces. Like, the entire dorm, I became famous because, and to be blunt, it kind of looked like a pimp car. It
Oh, totally.
it kind of looked like I mean, and it was his pride and joy, but he was over it now because this is like 1984. I mean, the car's like 8 years old. He wanted a new car. So he became very benevolent. The Tornado, which by the way, got like 11 miles to the gallon and gas, right? I mean, it was
So
like a
true.
gas. But I would bring it back. I brought it back to school and that's what I drove for a year. And my friends were dying because I was
Of
literally
course.
parking at like angles and there's no parallel parking in it. It doesn't fit anywhere. It does not fit the car. It's not made anymore because it doesn't fit, but it's just so funny. But it was freedom. I will say that I even though I wasn't embarrassed by it, but I was like, this is not the most practical thing. I can barely afford the
But you
gas,
had wheels. You
but I
had
had wheels,
wheels.
I had freedom,
Yeah.
and I had wheels before a lot of the other people
Yeah.
in my
That's
dorm
big.
had. And so like on the weekends, I'd be driving people around campus and I'd be, I became like the designated driver. But it's just so funny that I wanted you to have that visual of that. And it did. It had like the Landau roof. It looked like a pimp car. And it had like really cool wheels for 1976, right? But that was my first car.
Yeah.
Like campus. But it also meant it also gave me the freedom to go home when I wanted to go home.
Yeah.
Right. Like on a break or an end of semester, like I decided when I was going to go. It wasn't like I had to call and coordinate or, bum
Yeah.
a ride with somebody else or take the Trailways bus. It was freedom. It truly
Totally.
was. Yeah. So I never complained about it. I maybe complained about the gas prices, but I was like, okay, if you're going to give me the Tornado, but I knew in a weird way, I think I manipulated it because I knew when he had to do that round trip at Thanksgiving that was not going to go well because it was very quiet on the way home
Yeah.
from
Totally.
Bloomington to Toledo. It wasn't like he was asking me how the semester was going. It was kind of quiet. And again, no cell phones, no games. I literally just sat and looked out the window because
Totally.
I knew I was kind of in the doghouse, but that's okay. That's okay. So you talked about the pivot into tech. Remind people what you're doing now and remind people the name of your book because you mentioned it earlier and I want to make sure we talk about that because it's so important.
Yeah, so I left Amazon in 2023, and I knew I was going to retire, but I wasn't really sure what that meant. I didn't know what I wanted to use my time for. And so my husband said, "Oh, you should write a book." And I was like, "Well, I don't know if I have a book in me or if anybody would care or what it would take." And so I came up with this. I thought if I was going to do it, it had to be something I was passionate about. And one of the things that kind of in my through line is I always wanted to be a creative person, but I never really thought of creativity as being creative thinking or creative problem solving. As a young person, I always thought of it as an art or a talent.
Yes.
And I think so many people uh, are misled by the idea that creativity is something you're born with and that
Mm,
it's not something that you actually have innately within you and that you can trigger and nurture and grow. And as a leader of teams, especially teams that are responsible for innovation, it was always a struggle to get people to believe in themselves that they could solve a problem they hadn't seen before, that
mhm,
there were techniques or modes that they could follow if they didn't know the answer to get to an answer, and that the process could be very methodical and could support that part of their brain that needs to know, how do I do that, what's the way I get from here to there, but that they can use their own, brain power, their own experience, their own insights to figure out how to navigate, right? And so I wrote this book, Creative Velocity, partly because I was really concerned that that would actually get worse in the age of AI, that people would be more
mhm,
likely to give up on themselves and look to a good, clean output that looks professional and authored well from a
mhm,
machine with no soul, with no humanity, with no spirit of what matters, no purpose, no
mhm.
meaning. And so I felt like the time of that message was actually even more compelling than it was for me in my teens. And
Yes.
I think that as I say it to people, as I tell people that message now, which is you are a creative person, it's up to you, right, to activate that
Mhm,
person. It's up to you to build confidence in that person. And there's ways you can do it if you intentionally think about it. But if you lean back, let the machine do things, you will actually be a less creative person and potentially miss the opportunity to have greater impact in your own life, personally or professionally. And so it's really been eye-opening for people to recognize they can tap into something that seems accessible to them that previously seemed like they weren't born with or they didn't have the capacity to do. And so building up people's creative self-confidence to figure things out, to tell people you can figure this out, you can be the person that figures this out. And by the way, if you have constraints, think of MacGyver. That's a great example,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Because if you believe that about yourself, then problems become less daunting and your capacity to take control and have agency over them increases immensely. And so that is the work I'm doing
Okay.
now, which is to sort of take my own learning and really position it in today's world where it inspires people to step up, still use AI to solve problems, but to be the driver, to be the creator, to be the instigator, right? And the curator. And in that sense, provide
Mm.
meaning in all of the work.
I love those words like instigator, curator. I mean, it reminds me listening to you, it kind of reminds me of that, the Picasso quote that all children are born artists and then they forget basically. And it's our job to help them remember as adults. And I also think that this through line of confidence, but I mean, you have that, but then I love how you put the creative confidence on it. But also by broadening that definition of creativity, because I was probably the same way. I thought creativity meant you were good at art, or you were a good singer, or you were a good dancer, or you were an actor. And it wasn't about creative problem solving or creative project management, which you spent so much of your life doing, like when you were managing product, but also just managing the project of creating that product, or um, creative collaboration, like creative and also creating environments. I quickly realized as a leader, you did too, I needed to hire and attract and retain the best creatives. So I needed to create an environment that was physically and psychologically safe for them to thrive in. So even if I wasn't doing the creativity, I needed to create the environment for the creativity, the possibility for the creativity. So I love that work that you're doing now. And I also love velocity. I love that word too. I just love yeah.
Thanks. One of the other things and I've seen this in your work too, and I think I'm always a naturally curious person, and I'm always a learner. And I
Lifelong
think,
learner. Yep.
right, if you have that as a basis, then getting to that next step of creative confidence is a lot easier. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you have to really remind people to ask the questions, like your podcast name and the way that I know
Yeah.
you talk about it, which
Yeah.
is to interrogate the situation in a way that helps you get smarter about how to solve the problem. And
Yeah.
so instead of running from the problem, part of what you and I both do naturally is
Yeah.
dive into it, like learn more about it, because I can't solve it unless I understand why it exists and why that's difficult. And
Yeah.
when I started in the film industry and I was in my 20s and I'd never done like very much. I had a very sheltered life, and so I didn't have a lot of stress from not being able to do
Right.
things as a child.
Right.
But then when I got to Hollywood and I had to know how to pay my rent and I had to know how to pay the car insurance and all of those things, the stress of figuring things out was a little harder. But my confidence at that point was really in understanding that I didn't understand how things worked, and I was okay with learning how they worked. I think a lot of people are afraid to acknowledge they don't know how things work or they don't have an answer for something. And so then they don't take the time to delve into it and to be curious
Yeah.
about it and to learn it from multiple angles. And for me, if you asked me something when I was in my 20s, like I worked on a Kleenex commercial, and the whole storyboard had to be shot on a decommissioned aircraft carrier, and I had to find one. I'm 20. Like, I don't even know how I would ever think about solving that
Yeah.
problem, except,
Yeah.
wait, I should go figure that out. Like,
Yeah.
somebody else is going to have to figure that out. So why can't it be me that figures that out?
Yeah.
And so I think that natural curiosity, that comfort with not knowing, and then the willingness to dive in to learn about it is also a confidence builder. And a lot of people don't
Yes.
have that. And that, I think, undermines their capacity to ever reach that level of confidence.
I 100% do. I mean, I think what you and I bond over and have so much commonality in is that lifelong learner and being constantly curious. But you also mentioned this earlier, and I don't want to let it go by, is we both learned how to control our ego. We moved with pride and we moved with confidence, but we learned how to control our ego and to admit when we didn't know something. And that's
Absolutely.
really where Ask for an Answer comes from, where what I learned as a leader, thankfully, at a good point in my career was I did not have to have all the answers. If I hired well and I was humble enough to say, I don't have all the answers, and vulnerable enough to say, I don't have all the answers, they would come from the room. They would come from the team. They would come from the situation that I created. And I love when answers to interesting questions come from the most unexpected sources in the room, like which it could be your intern or the most junior person on the team would all of a sudden say something brilliant. I especially felt that at Fox for whatever reason. I think Fox was interesting because we were dealing with a lot of content that was more PG-13, even R-rated. And so it was more, I was managing a team who actually also was consuming the content, which was different than at Disney and DreamWorks, where we were basically making kids and family content. And
Mm-hmm.
so parents understood it, but a lot of people on the team didn't have kids, didn't remember when they were kids. But at Fox, we had people who knew The Simpsons. We had people who knew Sons of Anarchy, like, and were fans of it. And so sometimes what would come out of their mouths, you would be like, whoa, like, why weren't we thinking about that? Well, we weren't thinking about it because we were all caught up in our thinking we knew everything, and we weren't asking for an answer, and we weren't looking at unexpected places. And I think that curiosity and that lifelong learning, it's what keeps me going. If I feel like I'm not learning all the time, then I get bored really fast.
Me
And
too.
I then challenge myself to say, okay, what are you doing wrong? Like, why are you not learning? Like, you're not doing enough podcasts. You're not inviting the right people on. Something's wrong, because I'm in control of my time. And so if I'm not stimulated, that's my own fault.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's my own fault. I was going to ask you a question because you mentioned a word earlier, because I know the answer to this, but I want to have the discussion. Are you ever going to retire? Like, are you ever going to, if you mention this word, I know my answer, but I want to hear your, like, is there an ultimate pivot shift? I don't think so, Leslie, but I just met you. Like, where you're just, I don't know what you'd be doing. Gardening, golfing, reading. I don't know what you'd be doing. Like,
So it's funny. My husband will tell you I'm not retired. He would tell you that
right,
completely without question. To me, I am not looking for work. I am,
right.
and here's what I define as retirement in the
Okay, I want to
broadest
hear this.
sense.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything I don't want to do.
Okay.
I
But that's okay.
literally, I
Yes.
literally don't. I loved jobs I had, but I always had to do something I didn't want to do. I always had to
Yeah.
lay off
Yeah.
somebody or discipline people that I
Yeah.
didn't like those conversations, or that I had to go in with metrics that weren't as good as they were promised, and oh, this is going to be a
Yes.
horrible
Yes.
meeting, and or I have to pretend to like somebody who's in a more senior position than I am, because that's the way you get along in a company, but that person is a horror. Like, I worked
Yes.
at a company where a person was very overtly misogynistic, saying things like about people's hair and their clothing, or calling somebody who they were friendly with their boyfriend, and just the inappropriate things like that. And I had to put up with it because what choice did I have, right? Like, back then, especially, it wasn't easy to even raise
Mhm.
those issues in early parts of my career in the late 90s or early
For sure.
2000s.
For sure.
And so if something isn't giving me life, giving me fulfillment, giving me
Mhm.
joy, giving me
Yeah.
learning, I say, why am I suffering with this? I don't have to. When I think
Yeah.
about retiring, it's literally about spending the time doing the things that make me feel better about who I am as a human, who I
Right.
am as a wife,
Recognition.
who I
Yeah.
am in this, in the family, what I am, what I do for my neighbors, what, I think
Yeah.
of all those things I had to give up to
Yeah.
work in the kind of jobs and the kind of companies that I had, that I feel like the bounty of retirement is being filled with things I want to do. And if they're
Yeah.
not fun, I created an executive education course at the University of Washington Foster School of Business. And I really credit that school with supporting me during my pivot and allowing me to get my MBA while I was moving from the film industry into technology, and did a lot of things that are details that aren't important, but went above and beyond back in the day in the early 90s to make me successful at that school. And
Yeah.
so when I did this program, they offered to pay me what would be an amount of money that in education is reasonable, but for me wouldn't have moved the needle in one way or the
Right.
other. So I
Right.
said, consider it my donation to the school. I don't want to do it. And by the way,
Yeah.
if this stops being fun, I'm going to stop doing it. Okay. And you can't
Love
tell
it.
me as an employee, I have to go to these meetings, or I have, this is me contributing a gift of my time. And by the way,
Yeah. You're a
I manage,
volunteer. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I managed to get 10 other C-level executives to donate time to teach the class with me, and none of them get paid. And all of us do it for that same level of fulfillment. And so when I think of, yeah, I'm working on that class, it takes work, there's effort, there's things and meetings I have to do.
Right.
But if it stops being fun, it stops being for me. And
Right.
I don't need to
Right.
do it. It's not, I don't feel that obligation um to go through the bad days to get to the good days. And
That's
I don't,
so good. Yeah.
and when I think of retiring, yeah, I went and I'll give a speech to someone in another part of the state, and I'll drive there and they'll pay my gas and I'll make no money from it. But I'll
Right.
find 50 people who come up afterwards and say, "Where can I get your book?" Or "This was so
Yeah.
inspiring." And I'll think, okay, that's my pay. So
Yeah.
it's not work if you love it, is what they used to say about my job, but it was work for many of the
Yeah.
days that I didn't love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
this is what retirement is. It's living off my savings by and large, and mostly choosing what I do with my time that brings joy. And that is, I think, a chapter in life where I can then spend that time on so many different things, like this education program
Yeah.
or supporting other people right in their career development.
No, I mean, that's such a gift. Now with a spouse that's 22 years older, is he retired? Like,
He retired 20 years ago.
yeah.
Uh yeah, so
And is his
that part of
definition of retirement different? Like his definition is different than yours?
so he jokes because yes, he would assume I shouldn't be. Like I'll say, I had 3 phone calls today I have to do. So,
Yeah.
what do you want for dinner? And he's like, well, that doesn't seem like a day of retirement. But
Yeah.
the answer to the question was he did retire. He's actually of an age where I decided my retirement had to align where he could still do things with me, where
Yeah.
he is not in a position that he is homebound or
Yeah.
isn't able to travel
Yeah.
or to enjoy a round of golf or something. So I wanted my
Yeah.
retirement to overlap with enough of his good years that would happen. But he retired officially from employment, and then he started a business with his son that they ran for 10 years. And then they sold that business, I want to say about 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
so for the last 20 years, he's mostly, he followed me to Los Gatos to work at Apple. He followed me to New York to work at Discovery. And he just considers it his retirement is to go on this adventure wherever my career took me and whatever we were able to do. When I took business trips to go to a conference in Barcelona, he would come with me and go
Yeah.
explore the city for the day and then join me for dinner. So his
Yeah. This,
retirement was sort of adjacent to my work in some ways because I got to
yeah.
travel.
No, but I love that. But I mean, we talked about this in the prep call. My husband is 18 years younger than I am. So
Oh,
I'm,
so there you go.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's interesting because I too am grateful that I was a planner and that I have the ability to do what I'm doing right now because I'm not doing it for the paycheck, to your point. But part of that is because I was a big planner, and it was so interesting because last week I met with my financial planners for like one of my annual checkups, right? And we were going over everything, and there was a new person on my account. Like my main people were here, but there was like a new analyst, and she was lovely, and she had done a lot of work. And um she asked me, of course they want to know like, what year are you going to retire? Which basically is like, what year is the revenue going to change?
You're right.
Basically. Right.
You're right.
And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. So I like picked a date, and I was like, okay, and I put the date in, and then I saw her because she was like sharing her screen. We were like all on computers, but she was sharing her screen, and I saw that she then changed Joe's retirement date. And I said, oh, whoa, 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 wait a minute. No, no, no. Like, because it would have meant he was retiring at like 49, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, he's not retiring at 49. Wait a minute. And he was home. He wasn't in the planning. We do some stuff together, but then we do some stuff separately. But he heard me. Like he could hear me when I was like, whoa, 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 no. And he comes running down the stairs. And I said, no, 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 no. He's not retiring at the same time I am. And they're like, well, how's it going to work? I said, we're going to figure it out. Right. And he gets vacation and everything else. But I said to him, and it's so interesting what you're saying about your husband is I'm going to be the quote trailing spouse. My husband is a doctor. He's very well regarded in his field. He gets recruited. And I've said to him, I will be the trailing spouse now, like never have been, never in my life have been. And I think I told you, it really hit me when I went on his benefits. When we got married,
Yeah.
I was able to be on his benefits. And for the first time in my life, the benefit card, I'm line number two, right?
Your
He's the
spouse.
primary.
Your
Right. I'm the
spouse.
spouse. He's the primary. And I said part of my timing, which a lot of listeners of our age will understand, is when am I eligible for Medicare, right? Like because benefits are expensive. And so now I'm on your benefits, and then there'll be a point where I can transition on. But and then it's been funny because since that time, we've had dinner at home and we've gone out to dinner and we've talked more and more about it. But it's interesting what you're saying is I have used the word vitality a couple times even in this call. And I said, I do want you to be able to shift gears at some point where we're still able to do stuff together, right?
Yep.
Because one of the things is I don't want to be housebound. I don't want to be not vital. And there's trips that we want to do that require 30 or 40 days in a row off, right? And so I'm like, that's going to mean at some point you're going to have to make a shift. Now, I'm not letting you put a date in yet, but I'm thinking, okay, maybe when you're 55 and I'd be 73. Like I do this like 18-year thing all the time, but it's interesting to hear your story. But it made us laugh, but it opened up a lot of interesting discussions about how are we going to do this?
Yeah, I think for us the part about it was the last job I took was working at Amazon, and I at that point I could have retired before that. I could
Yeah.
have, like, we talked about it, but then this job came, and as Amazon does, they threw a ton of money at
Yeah.
me for
Yeah.
the job, and my husband said, well, if you could do that job for 2 years based on the calculations of what they're paying you, uh, that would be a really comfortable retirement. And it was
Yeah.
right during COVID. So I got to work at home. So it was like I was retired because I was with him. I go up to the break room, which was my kitchen, and I'd see him. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'd have
Yeah.
my morning coffee with him. So those 2 years were a lot more palatable because of COVID, because I was still around with him and we weren't missing out on travel because nobody was traveling. So it
No.
ended up being pretty easy from that standpoint. But he's been a CFO and a banker and an investor. And so all of my career, he has taken, and we joke about this, he has taken a part of my paycheck and stuffed it into a retirement fund because he didn't want to leave me without a good retirement
Yeah.
bucket. He's like, that'll make me feel better knowing that I'm
Yeah.
older, that you actually have savings. And then if I leave it to you to what to put in savings now, you won't think about it and you won't invest it in the right way. And because of that he was totally spot on right. Now we're in a position where it's what do we want to do with
Yeah.
our time, not how are we
Right.
going to budget to
And
get to
now
this
you
trip.
have
Or
right now you have the paradox of choice, which is lovely. I mean,
totally. I took a speaking assignment in Indianapolis at the Rally
oh,
Innovation Conference,
love it.
and I didn't want to fly there. We had a new puppy, and I didn't think my husband wanted to take care of it on his own, or I didn't feel good about leaving him alone for the couple of
Yeah.
days I would be there. So I said, "Hey, would you guys want to jump in the car and drive to Indianapolis with me? We're retired. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why can't we
Yeah.
do it?"
Do it on your time. Yeah.
And we've been doing road trips since we started dating. When we lived in LA, we drove to Cabo. So road trips are a thing. He looked at me, he's like, sure, let's do it. So we drove to Indianapolis and we drove home, and it was something we would never have done, with
Right.
the days that I would have had as vacation, or never would have been that kind, and such quality time together, right? In the car, visiting places we'd never been to before. We went to Mount Rushmore, for Pete's sakes. I never would have gone to Mount Rushmore otherwise. Like, this
No, I love,
experience
yeah, that's,
of creating experiences is what retirement is also
oh,
about.
you inspire me in so many ways, but this is really inspiring me because I really, yeah, I mean, we got together later in life. I mean, we've only been together 6 years. So he was always 18 years younger.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, but it's been interesting, because the other part of the financial planning that came up based on what we were talking about before we came on is I said, when do you have me leaving? Right. Like when, cause it's like about cash flow and stuff. And they're
Right.
like, oh, we have you at 94. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I hope, right? I mean, my family history wouldn't lead one to
I
believe
know.
that, but
That's what I was
you know
thinking.
what I mean? Like, the male history in my family is
Yeah.
not great, but I'm like, okay, that I will aspire to that then. Okay, 94. And I said, and by the way, if that happens, there's still something, for my nieces or for Joe. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, it was just such an interesting timing because, I just had my birthday and I just turned 61 and, I've had my hip replaced. I mean, I've had some things going on where you think more about
You feel your
like
age is the thing,
you
right? You
feel your
feel your
age. I mean,
age.
this is my thing. I don't know about you, but I was at the gym this morning. I go to the gym. I have a trainer. I do Pilates. I do all those things we're supposed to do, right? But I love my trainer because he tends to train the old guys, and like he's kind of an old guy, right? Like he's in his 50s, like compared to the other trainers. And there was like this young trainer next to us with a young client. And they were kind of like listening to me and my trainer because I talk when I'm training. I mean, I'm social. And I said, yeah, you know what? I just can't get over like, I know that I'm 61 and mentally I don't feel like that, but it's taking me like 10 minutes to get out of bed in the morning. And he said, yeah. And I said, you could see the younger kids kind of like listening. And I said, like, I wake up and I start the inventory, like, good morning, shoulder. How are you? Like, are you going to move? And like, hip, how are you feeling? How did we sleep last night? And knees, how are we going to be? And then I like kind of swing my legs over and I'm like, oh, and I make that sound like my father used to make. Like I literally hear that guttural, like, whoa, here we go. Like we're up. And I said, when I was younger, even 10 years ago, like I sprung out of bed. I'm a morning person. And I love sleep. And we were literally laughing so hard. And the guys next to us were like not getting it. And I said, you know what? Talk to me in 20 years. Like talk to me when you're in your 60s and you'll
Totally.
understand. Right. It's
Yeah, it's
just,
funny you say that. My grandson was visiting, and everyone's obviously a lot more attuned to my husband's health. As he's gotten older, they're a lot more
yeah.
attuned to what state of his health. But we were walking to the car, and he said, "How are you doing, Grandma?" And I was like so touched, first of all, that he asked. And I said, "It's all about the joints and the muscles. It's all about the joints and the muscles. That's all it's about for me." Right? Are they moving? Are they oiled?
True.
Are they greased? Are they
Yeah.
stretched? Because
Are they going to
everything falls
lock?
out
Are
of
they
that.
going to lock? Totally. I'm like, are they going to lock or, ooh, that's a new pain. Like,
Yeah, all in place, and it's all about that, right? That's the only thing I focus on. I'm not like focusing on my lungs or my organ. It's all about
or
my
your blood
joints.
pressure.
Yeah,
Totally. I'm like, yeah, totally.
nope, it's joints and muscles. That's it. That's all it is.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. And it's, you know, one of the lessons is my book is control the controllable, but leave space for the possible. But like my joints aren't always in my control. Like,
totally.
it's like sometimes they do some weird things or they need a couple extra minutes or
Yep.
they haven't warmed up incredibly. And I think, that's also the humbling. That's also the lifelong
Yeah.
learning, like learning
Yeah.
about your body and learning what you're capable of and learning. I mean, that's the other things that I don't push myself like I did when I was in corporate. If it's not working that day, it's not working.
Well, that's
Like,
the beauty of retirement for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
right? I can switch the schedule. I can
yeah,
change what this is not a workout day in the morning. I need to be moving around and it's a workout day in the afternoon now, right? Like I
100%.
need to be able to make those adjustments. And I do think until you hit that stage, you don't realize how many micro things you tolerate in terms of how
Mhm.
your day goes and what you have to deal with. And then when those all get lifted from that, I have a job, I have to work, I have people expecting me in this meeting or responding to this email. Once that gets lifted, the joy, finding the joy, like making the joy
Yeah.
is the work, right? Like
Making the joy.
that's it.
Making
Yeah.
the joy. That's huge. All right. That's a good way. All right. So my final question I always
Okay.
ask all my guests, which is ask for an answer. We've talked about so many amazing things. We could keep going for hours. But what's the one question that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
I think the only thing that I would have thought you might have asked was, what would you tell your younger self, given that you have,
Question.
right? Especially because you seem to believe that I had all this shit together when I was
Yeah.
younger
Yeah.
and I
You're
was all confident about things.
So that's
I
going to be my final question to you. What would you tell your younger self?
I think to go easier on myself. I think I was really, really,
Amen.
really hard on myself. I think I was super critical of my performance, my appearance, my
Yeah.
vocalizations of my emotions, whatever it was
Yep.
that didn't work. I would beat myself up for days about it. For
Yep.
days, I would, you know, I no one could punish me more than I could punish myself for my mistakes.
Yes.
and and I think that piece of it would have made things a lot easier. I think I actually made things harder because they seemed so much bigger for how much punishment I gave myself for my stupidity or my ignorance.
It's brilliant. Brilliant. That's a great way to end. That's a great question, but I'm glad I didn't ask it until you did.
Well, it sort of fit with the sense I felt like we were getting really positive about how great I was at my
Yeah.
self-awareness, and I kept thinking to
No, but
myself, boy, I was brutal on myself at that point, and so
yeah,
maybe I
yeah.
wasn't quite as
Your
contextually aware.
self-talk. Yeah, your self-talk. Well, Leslie, thank you so much. This has been amazing. You are the perfect guest for Ask for an Answer.
Oh,
I cannot wait to do the clips on this. There's going to be so many little pearls you were dropping along the way. But
thank you. You're so easy
and
to talk to. You're a great
oh
host
no,
because
so
it's
we're going
such
to
a
stay
great
in touch. We
conversation.
said that. We said that. We're going to stay in touch,
Yeah, absolutely.
regardless of book life and podcast and everything
Yeah,
else. We're going to stay in touch.
absolutely. Be my
Thank
pleasure.
you for sharing. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for spending this time with us on Ask for an Answer. If this conversation sparks something for you, don't just nod and move on. Take one idea, one question, one uncomfortable and bring it into your next meeting, your next one-on-one, or your next big decision. That's how this becomes a practice, not just a podcast. If you're leading a team, a classroom, a company, or just your own next chapter, you don't have to have it all figured out. You do have to be willing to listen, to ask better questions, and to create the kind of safety where people will actually tell you what they see. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who's in the arena with you. And if you want more tools, stories, and real talk leadership moments, make sure you follow the show and leave a review so others can find us. I'm Jim Fielding. Thank you for being here, for leading with less armor and more intention. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep asking for an answer.